This is Baruch here at the Tikkun Elevator Kolo, and you'll remember that we've been learning over here the Tivuk Kavanos, which is a pirush on the Shar Kavanos. So I should have said it the other way around. We're learning the Shar Kavanos, and we're using the Tivuk Kavanos to try to understand really well what's going on. So we read a little bit over here, and we're down into the number Yud Bet, and I'm just going to pick it up, and you'll try to remember what it was that we were learning previously about the different ways. The basic principle is that Zer Anpin has mochin coming into him from Abba and Ima. These mochin are both male and female. They're called Gevuros, Chasadim, and Gevuros. The Chasadim grow Zer Anpin, and the Gevuros grow the Nuk for the Zer Anpin. So that's the male side grows in Chesed. I think that's probably the wrong word. In Chasadim, these are concepts of giving, and the receiving end, the receiver is the Gevuros. And that goes to the Nukva. The question is how they both come to Zer Anpin. The Nukva has very little or nothing. She's not. So how do we build her up? So we have to transfer from the Keser of Zer Anpin down to his Malchus all of the Gevuros that he has and make them get into the Nukva. And we've been talking about that. How that transfer takes place. And this is the technical part of the concept, of the famous concept, the basic fundamental concept of the Sira. So we're over here at Yud Bet. I think we're okay. And it says, Hakesed the Nuk Mekaven Keneged Shtei Shlishim Achronim Tiferes Tezan. And once we said that the Nuk is smaller than Zah, so that her head, the top of her head, her Keser, is really at his chest. So when you talk about his Keser feeding her Keser, it's hard to see that because they're not lined up. So he said, and actually it's the dinim in the Tiferes of Zer Anpin. That is from the cause of Lamata, in the body of Zer Anpin. That goes to the Nuk. Now let's read one more. So he said, Shar Teishas Spheros the Nuk, Omdos Keneged Shlosh Spheros Nai the Zah. So here we're talking about the Chagad of Zal. Let's say that basically we're talking about the lower 2/3 of his Chagad. Now we're talking about the Spheros of the Nai, Netzachod Yisod, which represents the legs and the Yisod. Okay, so therefore, Tzarech L'chalek Shlosha Spheros Able V'Teisha Chalokim. So now, how are you going to work this out? So we say like this, it's necessary for those, because you're not using Keser, she's not lined up with it. So how are you going to be able to bring 9 spheros in he has only 3 spheros, which is Netzachod Yisod. And he's going to have to give all the Gevuros that he has into 9 different places in the Nuk, because all she has is the Keser so far. So he said, how does that work? So therefore he says, how do you do it? So there's these spheros, that's the 9, into 9 halakim. That's 3 each. This is a little bit obscure. So if you heard it one time, maybe you'll hear it again. But the fichah is called sphere dezer anpin the shlosha parakim. So therefore we see what's happening here in all the spheros that are in the Nai of Zer Anpin. They're all going to have to be divided into 3s. Netzach Dezah Ha'omed B'kav Yamim. So the Netzach, which is the first of the 3, it's on the right line. Yesh Bo Shlosh Prakim. So they're going to say the Netzach, which is really saying another way, it's a leg. So the Rav has given us permission to be able to analogize this anatomy to us, so we can understand it. So therefore you take the right leg, which is Netzach, and you divide it into 3 parts. So you could say, well, it's a part from the hip to the knee, from the knee to the ankle, and ankle to the foot, and that's it. So now looking at Malchus, though, with all of this is going to go over to there, she has her right line. Now, let me see. I think we lost the place here. Let me get it back, and let me try something else. I don't know if this light is too glary. I don't know. Not too bad. So the kav yamim chacham. So the whole thing falls into the right line, which is chachma, chesed, and netzach of the Nuk. Right? So the 3 prakim go into her 3 spheros. That's called perik the sphero. Ho dezah ho omed b'kav small. Now the left leg, yesh bo shlosh prakim, also be divided into 3 parts. Connect them only with Malchus, so they're in Malchus, which is the Nook, where all of these dinim have to be transferred. Shlosh spheres, the Kav small Baga, which is Bina, Gevura, and Hod. So that division, that would be the upper parak would go into Bina, and the middle parak would go into Gevura, and etc. Yesod Dezah Omed B'Kavam Soy. Now, what about the Yesod Dezah? Now, that's the part that's in the middle. Yesh Bo Shlosh Prakim. It's also going to have 3 Prakim. So it's 3 Prakim on the right, 3 Prakim on the left, and 3 Prakim in the middle. B'Negdom Omdim B'Malchus Shlosh Spheres the Kavim Soy. And then corresponding to that are 3 spheros that are going to have to be built, are going to be built out of them on the middle line, which is called Dati. What's Dati? Dat is Das, Teferis, and Yesod. They're in a line. That's the middle line. Das, Teferis, Yesod. That is the elevator line. V'nimsi ki kol perak etzel zer anpin. So then it comes like this. If you look at zer anpin and you look at his nai and you start dividing it into portions, every one of the prakim of the portions, etzel zer anpin mekabel keneged sphere shleim b'malchus. It's good spar. So it's a portion of the Netzach Hazah. But that portion could become a whole line over in Malchus. Fizer Mekabelas Hanuk Rak Es Hadinim Shebechetze Hatachna Dezer Anpin. And that brings us to that phrase that we saw previously, that the Nuk only receives her dinim from the lower half of Zer Anpin. Shesham Nimsaim Shtei Shlishi Tachtoinin Teferes. That's where you find the lower 2/3 of Zer Anpin. V'shlosha Sefiros Nai, and they could be divided up also into Nai. That's the Nai of Zer Anpin. Now I have a little anatomical question about, well, what's 2/3? I mean, 2/3. Well, 2/3 is it's at the diaphragm, somewhere around the diaphragm. It's not the belly button and it's not the chest. It's somewhere in between over there. So he's saying that's the place where the Nai of Zer Anpin is located. So he said, Na'ivihu Mekabelas Meperik the Spheric Kaniskar, and that's where you see the concept. This is the concept from called a perik to a sphera, as we mentioned before. He said, the Hainish Shachadinim Anim Soim Beperik Echad Zer Anpin, that is the dinim that are found in one joint, the Verik Anpin, Holchin the Sphera Shalem, it goes to complete sphera on the other side of the Nook. Now, let me see, and we're going to go up to the top. Here we are on page Kuf Kaf Zayin in learning Rosh Hashanah. So he said, "V'nevoyer inyan shtei bechinos elul." So now we're going to explain these 2 bechinos. Eich na'asa b'sari yamim elul. How exactly did they get a portion? Because we said that the nukva is not completed until the 10th day of the Eser Simei Tshuva. Gam yizboyer heiti meforish Ofen Malachas and Nesira. So also we're going to get into more detail exactly how the real work of the Nesira takes place. We're going to look at it more carefully. He says, let's put a magnifying glass on it. Now let's look at number Yud Daled. That's all we have here on the Tiv. The Tiv stays like this. Now he says, Shtei Bechinos Elo should Nizkarno La'el. So there's 2 aspects that we talked about, we mentioned up above. So now he's not saying that it's one versus the other. I haven't heard him say that yet. You see, it seems like it's one and the other. That's what it seems like so far. So he said these 2 bechinos, the bechina rishon the sphere, that's kasser, the chachma, the chachma, like that. Which is called by the name of parak, the shnia, because you're dividing the knives, their anpin, into 9 parts. Both of them take place during the time of the Eser Simei Tshuva. So until we finish this essay, I guess he's talking about this parak. Now we're going to start learning exactly how is this sirah come about. So there's all different kinds of parts of these things. We have to imagine now that we're deep, deep, deep into the light of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu in a place called Etzilus. And this is the formation in some way that is taking place there. A movement that takes place on Rosh Hashanah, to be able to bring the mochin, and through the Asar Simei Tshuva, to bring the dinim inside of Zer Anpin into a complete rebuilding of the nukva of Zer Anpin. Kamo Ken Yizbar V'Lahalak Drush Zeh. So as we go on through this drush, Oven Melechas and Nesira B'Kol Prateho, what is the way that the Nesira works in all of its different parts. Now, let's look at number Tes Vav. I'm still interested in what he said on page Kuf Kaf Chas. So let me make sure that I got the best picture I can get. I'm running my finger over this, kind of seems to help it focus. He says, let's read up at the top. Across, these are the words of Rabbi ARI, the Holy ARI, as told to Rabbi Chaim and Vital. And now that I'm thinking about it, to realize that this was put together, all of these different bits of teachings were put together by the son of Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was Rabbi Shmuel Vital. It says, Hine b'yom rishon de Rosh Hashanah, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, shehu yom shishi shenivra bo Adam Rishon. Now, we said before, there was a lot to be said about the fact that Adam Rishon lived with his wife. This actually took place on the wrong day. So actually the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which really should have been the day before the day of their meeting, of their mating, took place on the sixth day. That's what he says. Az hipil Hashem tardema al zah. What happened then is that Zer Anpin went into a deep sleep. Why? Today, Ninsor as a nukva omedes ba'achrav, and the reason why is in order to remove her, she who is standing on his backside. Zeh inyan ofen and Nesira. So now this is the subject we're talking about now, the way that the Nesira operates. So originally, the mochin that she needed in order to build herself up, we had to go through Zer Anpin to get to her. So in some way, in that way, what we see is that moving from the parts of up above, which in this case are the parts of Panimi, which would be Zer Anpin, to the parts of below it or outside of it, requires a hismatus of light. Because just moving from parts to the parts, it limits the light. There are walls of Zer Anpin. There are different organs of Zer Anpin. All of that it processes light and limits it. So there's more digestible. And the Nook has less light because of that. So he gives it from his das, the Gevurah. So just a little word on the side of this is the concept that the Gevuros are part, and the Chasadim and Gevuros are inside. They come from the Yisod of Ima into the Das of Zer Anpin. You have to imagine this, that she's coming into Zer Anpin's head, so to speak. She goes right down through his throat, and there's an extension that goes into his chest. In that extension, which is called the Yisod of Ima, you find that there are 5 Chasadim and 5 Gevuros. They're going to spread throughout the body of Zer Anpin, but the Gevuros are destined to go to his female counterpart, the Nook. Because now she's spread into Zer Anpin. But that's the way it was. And with Zah, why did Zah have all these Chasadim and Gevuros inside of him? Because Ima came into him. Because she's entered in, in other words, she brought her Shefa in from the Benimius of Zer Anpin throughout Zer Anpin. But so, what are you going to do here? So, in other words, we want the Nukva to get the most choice Mochim in order to really build her. So, but now Zah goes to sleep, so to speak. Ima leaves him. That expanded consciousness that he had of all these good and the bad things that he had with him, but say like that is gone, sleeping. So he has the mochim also that he gave to the Nook. Those leave too. So his pashtus nai the Ima, and they go back into the nai of Ima. Now we're going over the real detail, the background that we need to know on the Nesira. So it goes, let me say the words, but so his pashtus nai the ima yilo bo kanoida. V'az gam etara de gevur shebedas nistalko mimenu. So therefore, all of this which was inside of Zeranpin, even that which was destined to go to the nukva, we'll see how that works out in the tiv in the next year. But basically, what you're saying over here is that everything leaves Zeranpin. Everything that belonged to the nukva, everything that belonged to him, leaves Zeranpin and goes back into the yesod of Ima that gave it. So we'll see how that is by looking at the tiv with God's help tomorrow. And we thank you very much for listening to us today. This is Baruch Fleischman, Tikkun Elevator Kola.